My cousin always mocked my job. When I became her boss, she got a special assignment. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The email notification chimed softly on my MacBook at exactly 7:43 a.m., the same time I was stirring sugar into my third cup of coffee. 23 years in corporate finance had taught me that good news rarely arrived before 8 a.m., and bad news usually came with a phone call. This was different. The subject line made my pulse quicken. Organizational changes, effective immediately. I was now the regional director of operations for the entire Northeast Division. 47 people would report to me, including, and here's where the universe revealed its twisted sense of humor, including someone named Victoria Chen Morrison. My cousin Vicky. The same Vicky who'd spent the last 2 decades making sure everyone knew that her cousin David was just an accountant. The irony wasn't lost on me, neither was the opportunity. Christmas Eve, 1998. Uncle Robert's house in Westchester. So, David, still pushing papers around? Vicky's laugh carried across the living room like fingernails on a chalkboard. She was 24 then, fresh out of Columbia with her communications degree, working at some PR firm in Manhattan. I was 26, 2 years into my first job at Morrison Associates, wearing a sweater my mom had bought me at JCPenney. Vicky lounged against the marble fireplace in her black Prada dress. She made sure to mention it was Prada. While I sat on the floral couch that Aunt Linda had owned since the Carter administration. The whole family was there. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, a handful of cousins. An audience. It's actually forensic accounting, I said quietly, not looking up from my plate of ham. I investigate financial fraud for... Oh, fraud! How exciting, she interrupted, her voice dripping with theatrical enthusiasm. Do you get to wear a little badge? Maybe carry a tiny calculator instead of a gun? The relatives chuckled. Even my own mother smiled a little. I felt my face burn red, the way it always did when Vicky turned her spotlight on me. Someone has to do the boring jobs, right, David? She winked at her audience. Not everyone can be out there changing the world like some of us. I nodded and took another bite of ham. It tasted like cardboard. Present day, 9:15. I scrolled through the employee directory on my company portal, looking at faces and names that would now answer to me. There she was, Victoria Chen Morrison, account coordinator, hired 3 months ago. Her LinkedIn photo showed the same blonde highlights she'd been getting since college, the same confident smile that had intimidated me for decades. Her bio mentioned extensive experience in client relations and strategic communications. Account coordinator. That was barely above entry level. I picked up my desk phone and dialed HR. Jennifer, it's David Chen. I need you to walk me through the background on Victoria Chen Morrison in client services. Oh, Vicky, she came to us through Richard Morrison. I think they know each other socially. Her previous company downsized and she needed something quick. Why? Richard Morrison. Of course. Richard was the nephew of the Morrison and Morrison Associates, the same firm where I'd started my career 23 years ago as a junior accountant making $28,000 a year. The same firm where I'd worked my way up to senior analyst, then audit manager, then department head, before jumping to 3 different companies, each move strategic, each move upward. Richard was also Vicky's boyfriend, according to her Facebook page. Just getting familiar with my new team, I said. Can you have her report to my office at 2 o'clock? I'd like to meet with all the account coordinators individually this week. Of course. Should I tell her what it's about? Just say it's a standard one-on-one with a new regional director. Nothing more. July 4th, 2003. The family barbecue at my parents' house. I was 31, 5 years deep into what I thought was a dead-end job, living in a studio apartment in Queens and driving a 1997 Honda Civic with 130,000 miles on it. Vicky was 29, engaged to some investment banker, showing off her 2-carat ring to anyone who'd look. David still lives in that cute little apartment, don't you? She announced during dessert. loud enough for the entire patio to hear. Right above the bodega? How wonderfully authentic. My grandmother looked confused. What's wrong with where David lives? Oh, nothing's wrong with it, Grandma, Vicky said sweetly. It's just that some of us are ready to move on to the next phase of life, you know? Start building real careers, real relationships. She held up her ring hand, letting the diamond catch the afternoon sunlight. My cousin Tommy, who worked construction and lived in his parents' basement, shot me a look of sympathy. At least he understood what it felt like to be Vicky's designated underachiever. Actually, I started, then stopped myself. I'd been working 16-hour days for 6 months on a case that would eventually bring down a major pharmaceutical company for healthcare fraud. I couldn't talk about it confidentiality agreements. But it was the kind of work that mattered, the kind that saved lives. But how do you explain that to people who think success is measured in square footage and diamond carats? Actually what? Vicky prompted, her smile sharp as a blade. Nothing, just, it's a nice neighborhood. She laughed. Oh, David, you're so humble. 1:45 p.m. My office on the 37th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I decorated it simply, a glass desk, 2 leather chairs, a small conference table, and exactly 3 personal items. A photo of my parents, a Mount Rushmore paperweight from a client in South Dakota, and a crystal award from the Treasury Department for my work on the pharmaceutical fraud case. The case I couldn't talk about at that barbecue in 2003. I straightened my tie. Hermes, though I doubted Vicky would notice, and reviewed her file one more time. 3 jobs in 5 years, 2 layoffs, 1 mutual separation. Her performance reviews were middling at best. Comments like, needs improvement in attention to detail, and would benefit from additional training in client management appeared regularly. Jennifer from HR knocked on my door at exactly 2 p.m. Your 2 o'clock is here. Send her in. Victoria Chen Morrison walked into my office like she owned it. Same confident stride, same way of scanning a room like she was cataloging everything for future judgment. She wore a navy blue blazer that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Queens, and her hair was still that perfectly highlighted blonde that had always made me feel invisible at family gatherings. She was halfway across the room before she really looked at me. I watched the recognition hit her face. First confusion, then surprise, then something that might have been panic, quickly covered by that old familiar smile. David? Oh my God, what are you doing here? I stood up from behind my desk and extended my hand. Hello, Vicky. Please, have a seat. She shook my hand automatically, her eyes darting around my office, taking in the view, the awards, the expensive furniture. I could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. I don't understand, she said, settling into one of the leather chairs. Are you here for a meeting too? In a way. I sat down across from her, opened her personnel file, and let the silence stretch for just a moment too long. I'm the new Regional Director of Operations. As of this morning, you report to me. The color drained from her face, then returned in a rush of pink that started at her collarbone and worked its way up. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. You're my boss? That's correct. She let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. David, wow, that's incredible. How did you? I've been with Meridian Financial for 3 years, I said evenly. Before that, I was a department head at Carlyle Group. Before that, audit manager at Pierce Associates. I paused. It's been quite a journey from those early days at Morrison Associates. She nodded frantically. Right, of course. I remember you worked there. That's actually how I know Richard Morrison. He got me this job here. I know Richard. Good family. Another silence. This time she filled it. David, I have to say, this is such a nice surprise. I mean, what are the odds, right? Family ending up at the same company? I made a note in her file, nothing important, just letting her see me right. I wanted to meet with you today to discuss your role here and my expectations going forward. Of course, absolutely. Yes. You've been here 3 months. How are you finding the work? She straightened up, slipping into what I recognized as her interview voice. Oh, it's fantastic. Really engaging work. The clients are great, and I feel like I'm really contributing to the team's success. I glanced at her performance metrics on my computer screen. I see you've been assigned primarily to smaller accounts. The Peterson Group, Hartwell Associates, a few others. How's that going? Great, really great. I mean, every client is important, right? Even the smaller ones. Absolutely. Although I notice you've had some challenges with the Hartwell account specifically. 3 client complaints in 2 months. Her smile flickered. Those were just miscommunications. Client expectations weren't clearly set from the beginning. It happens. I nodded and made another note. I see. Well, I have good news. I'm moving you to a new account. Something more substantial. Her whole demeanor changed. The nervous energy disappeared, replaced by the old Vicky confidence. That's wonderful. I've been hoping for something more challenging. Excellent. You'll be taking over the Morrison Industries account. Morrison Industries? Richard's family company? That's right. They're one of our most important clients. The account is worth about $12 million annually. Her eyes lit up. This was what she'd been waiting for. A prestigious account. A chance to work directly with her boyfriend's family business. An opportunity to finally show everyone what she was capable of. David, Thank you. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been looking for. I thought you'd be pleased. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the park. Of course, it's also our most demanding account. The Morrison family has very specific expectations about service levels, response times, reporting accuracy. There's really no room for error. I understand completely. The previous account manager, Janet Sterling, handled Morrison Industries for 8 years before her promotion. She knew their business inside and out. Every subsidiary, every reporting requirement, every family member's preferences. I turned back to face Vicky. You'll need to get up to speed quickly. How quickly? Well, there's a quarterly review meeting next Friday. The entire Morrison family will be there. Richard's father, his uncles, the board members. They'll expect a comprehensive presentation on their portfolio performance, with detailed analytics and recommendations for the next quarter. I watched her face carefully. Janet usually spent about 6 weeks preparing for these meetings. You'll have 8 days. The confidence wavered slightly. 8 days, right? That should be fine. Janet's notes are in the system, of course, but she's in London now, setting up our European operations. 6-hour time difference, very busy schedule. I sat back down and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Here's everything you'll need to review. Portfolio summaries, historical data, family preference profiles, industry analysis reports. I slid the folder across the desk. It was easily 3 inches thick. This is just the basics, I continued. The detailed financial models are in the shared drive, about 40 Excel files, some with 30 or 40 tabs each. You'll want to understand every number, since the Morrisons are very thorough in their questioning. Vicky lifted the folder with both hands, testing its weight. This is quite a bit of material. Oh, and one more thing. Richard specifically asked that you handle this account personally. No delegating to junior staff. He wants to make sure his family gets the white glove service they're paying for. Of course, I wouldn't dream of delegating. Perfect, I smiled. I have complete confidence in you, Vicky. After all, you've always been the ambitious one in the family. The next 8 days were exactly what I'd expected. I didn't spy on Vicky, didn't sabotage her work, didn't set her up to fail. I didn't need to. I simply gave her exactly what she'd always said she wanted. A big, important account and the chance to prove herself. I walked by her desk each evening around 7 p.m. on my way out. The first 3 days, she was there, surrounded by printed spreadsheets and empty coffee cups, her usually perfect hair looking progressively more frazzled. By Thursday, she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. On Friday morning, she knocked on my office door at 8:30 a.m. Come in. She entered carrying a laptop and a stack of presentation folders, but something was different about her posture. The swagger was gone. David, I need to talk to you about the Morrison presentation. Of course. The meeting's at 10. Are you ready? She set down her materials and sank into the chair across from my desk. I'm struggling with some of the portfolio analysis. The derivatives calculations aren't matching Janet's projections, and I can't figure out where the discrepancy is coming from. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of discrepancy? About $2 million. $2 million. I let that number hang in the air. In which direction? I'm not sure. That's the problem. The numbers in the Q3 report don't match the numbers in the current holding statement, and when I try to reconcile them with the monthly performance data, I get 3 different totals. I nodded slowly. Have you tried cross-referencing with the subsidiary reports? The what? Morrison Industries has 4 subsidiary companies. Each files separate reports. You need to consolidate them before you can get accurate portfolio numbers. Her face went white. I didn't know about the subsidiaries. It's in Janet's notes. Page 47, I believe. She frantically flipped through the folder I'd given her 8 days ago. I could see her scanning pages, looking for something she'd clearly missed. David, I don't think I'm going to be ready for this presentation. The Morrison family is expecting you in 90 minutes. I know, but Richard specifically requested that you handle this account. I know, but I'm not... She stopped herself, took a deep breath. Could we postpone, just for a week? I need more time to... Vicky. I kept my voice gentle, almost kind. The Morrisons are our most important client. This is a quarterly review they've been planning for months. 3 board members are flying in from California. We can't postpone. She stared at me, and for the first time in 30 years, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear of failure. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. I want you to do the job you were hired to do. The Morrison Industries quarterly review meeting was held in Conference Room A, the big one with the mahogany table and the wall of windows overlooking Manhattan. I arrived 5 minutes early and took a seat in the back corner, officially there as the regional director, unofficially there to watch. The Morrison family filed in at exactly 10 a.m. Richard's father, James Morrison, led the way. 72 years old, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Behind him came Richard, looking nervous, followed by 2 uncles and the company's CFO. Vicky stood at the head of the table in a crisp white blouse and her navy blazer, her presentation materials arranged neatly in front of her. From a distance, she looked composed, professional, ready. But I was close enough to see her hands shaking. Good morning, everyone, she began, her voice slightly too bright. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I'm excited to share our analysis of your Q3 performance and our projections for Q4. She clicked to her first slide, Morrison Industries Portfolio Overview. As you can see, your total portfolio value as of September 30th was approximately $47 million. James Morrison frowned and made a note on his legal pad. Richard shifted in his seat. That represents a 3-2 growth over Q2, Vicky continued, which puts you slightly ahead of the SP 500 average of 2.8. Excuse me, James Morrison interrupted. Did you say 47 million? Yes, sir. Our portfolio was valued at 52 million at the end of August. Are you telling me we lost $5 million in September? Vicky's eyes darted to her laptop screen, then back to James Morrison. Let me double-check that number. She clicked frantically through her slides, clearly looking for something she couldn't find. The room fell silent except for the sound of her laptop keys. I'm sorry, she said, after what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds. There seems to be a small discrepancy in my figures. A small discrepancy of $5 million? Richard's uncle asked. Yes. No. Vicky's composure finally cracked. I apologize. I think there might be an error in my calculations. James Morrison looked at Richard, then at me in the back corner, then back at Vicky. Ms. Chen Morrison, have you included our subsidiary holdings in this calculation? Subsidiary holdings? The room went dead silent. Morrison Industries owns 4 subsidiary companies, James Morrison said slowly. Surely you're aware of this. Yes, of course, She looked down at her notes, shuffling through papers. I may have overlooked some of the subsidiary data in my analysis. Richard looked mortified. His father looked furious. "Perhaps," James Morrison said, standing up, "we should reschedule this meeting for when you've had time to prepare properly." "Mr. Morrison, I can fix this. If you give me just a few minutes." "Ms. Chen Morrison." His voice was ice cold. "We've been working with Meridian Financial for over a decade. We've never had a quarterly review where our account manager didn't know our basic corporate structure." He gathered his papers and looked directly at me. "Mr. Chen, I'd like to speak with you privately after this meeting." Then he walked out. The other Morrison family members followed. Richard paused at the door and gave Vicky a look that could have frozen water, then left without a word. Vicky and I were alone in the conference room. She slumped into her chair and put her head in her hands. "I screwed up." "Yes, you did." "I'm going to get fired, aren't I?" I walked to the head of the table and began gathering her presentation materials. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you learned anything from this." She looked up at me, her perfect makeup smudged, her confidence completely shattered. "What do you mean?" I sat down in the chair next to her, not across from her, but beside her. For the first time in this entire encounter, I softened my voice. "Vicky, do you remember when we were kids, and you used to ask me why I liked math so much?" She nodded. "You said it was boring, that it was just numbers on a page, that it didn't matter in the real world." I remember. But math isn't just numbers. It's precision. It's taking complex problems and breaking them down into pieces you can understand, then building them back up into solutions. It's about being thorough, being careful, being right. I pointed to her laptop screen, still showing the incorrect portfolio numbers. "What happened here today happened because you approached this job the same way you've approached everything your whole life. You assumed that confidence and charm would be enough, that you could figure it out as you went along, that the details didn't matter." She was crying now, quietly, trying not to let me see. "But details do matter, Vicky, especially when you're managing other people's money, especially when their trust and their financial futures are in your hands." "I know that now." "Do you?" She wiped her eyes with a tissue from the box on the conference table. "What happens next?" "Next, you go back to your desk and you spend the weekend learning everything there is to know about Morrison Industries. Every subsidiary, every investment, every transaction from the past 5 years. You read Janet's notes cover to cover, you build spreadsheets until you dream in Excel formulas. And then, on Monday morning, you call James Morrison personally and ask for another chance. You tell him exactly what went wrong, you take full responsibility, and you promise him that it will never happen again. What if he says no?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street 37 floors below. "Then you'll have learned something valuable about consequences." She didn't get fired. It took 3 weeks, 2 personal apologies, and a flawless makeup presentation. But James Morrison eventually agreed to keep Vicky on the account with conditions. Every report had to be reviewed by me before it went to the client. Every projection had to be double-checked. Every meeting had to have a backup plan. Vicky accepted the conditions without argument. More surprisingly, she met them. The confident, careless woman who'd walked into my office a month ago had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. She stayed late, arrived early, asked questions when she didn't understand something instead of pretending she did. The change wasn't lost on the rest of the team. Jennifer from HR mentioned that Vicky had signed up for additional training courses. Her colleague Marcus told me she'd started bringing donuts to the morning meetings and actually listening when other people talked. But the real change became apparent 3 months later, at my mother's birthday party. November 15th, 2024, my parents' house in Forest Hills. The whole family was there again. The same cast of characters who'd watched Vicky humiliate me at countless gatherings over the years. Grandma, now 93 and still sharp as a tack. Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, Tommy, now a successful contractor with his own business, and assorted cousins, spouses, and children. And Vicky, who arrived 20 minutes late and looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She found me in the kitchen, helping my mother arrange vegetables on a platter. "David, could I talk to you for a minute?" My mother looked between us, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand, and diplomatically retreated to the living room. "What's up?" Vicky leaned against the counter, fidgeting with her car keys. She looked different. Not just tired, but somehow smaller. More real. I wanted to thank you. For what? For not firing me. For giving me a chance to fix things. She paused, searching for words. For teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago. I continued arranging carrots on the platter. Which is? That being smart and working hard actually matters more than being loud and confident. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Humility. It looked strange on her, like a new coat she hadn't quite learned how to wear yet. You're doing better at work, I said. I'm trying. I have a lot to make up for. She was quiet for a moment. Richard and I broke up. I'm sorry. Don't be. Turns out when you're not the golden girl anymore, some people lose interest pretty quickly. She gave me a rueful smile. Funny how that works. We stood there in comfortable silence for a minute, listening to the sounds of family conversation from the next room. David, can I ask you something? Sure. All those years, at all those family parties, were you ever angry? When I said those things about your job, your apartment, your life? I thought about it. Sometimes. But you never said anything. What would have been the point? You wouldn't have listened. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have. Tommy poked his head into the kitchen. Hey, you two hiding in here? Mom wants to take pictures. We followed him into the living room, where my mother was organizing everyone for the traditional birthday photo. As we arranged ourselves around Grandma's chair, the same configuration we'd used for 30 years, I noticed something different. Vicky wasn't holding court anymore. She wasn't making jokes at anyone's expense or drawing attention to herself. She was just there. Part of the family in a way she'd never quite managed before. After the photos, Uncle Robert asked his traditional question. So, everyone doing well? Jobs going good? Around the room, Tommy talked about his latest construction project. Cousin Sarah mentioned her promotion at the bank. Various relatives shared updates about their work, their kids, their lives. When it was my turn, I said simply, "Work's going well. I was promoted to regional director a few months ago." Regional director? Uncle Robert looked impressed. David, that's fantastic. What company? Meridian Financial. We do portfolio management, financial planning, fraud investigation. Fraud investigation? Grandma perked up. Like those shows on TV? Something like that, Grandma. That's so interesting, Aunt Linda said. I bet you have some stories. A few. When the conversation moved on to Cousin Sarah's promotion, I caught Vicky watching me. She was smiling, but it wasn't her old sarcastic smile. It was something softer, something that might have been respect. Later, as people were getting ready to leave, she approached me one more time. David. Yeah? For what it's worth, I always knew your job was important. I just didn't want to admit it. Why not? She was quiet for a long time. Because admitting you were doing something meaningful would have meant admitting I wasn't. The following Monday, I was back in my office by 7 a.m., reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for a board meeting. The view from my 37th floor window never got old. Central Park spreading out below, the city humming with energy and possibility. At 8:15, there was a knock on my door. Come in. Vicky entered with a folder and a cup of coffee, not for herself, but for me. She set it on my desk and took her usual seat. Morrison Industries quarterly projections, she said, sliding the folder across the desk. I finished them last night. I opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. The analysis was thorough, the projections conservative but optimistic, the supporting data meticulously organized. It was good work. Really good work. This looks excellent, Vicky. Thank you, she paused. David, I have a question about the Henderson Group account. I noticed some irregularities in their September transactions, and I wanted to run them by you before I flagged them for investigation. I looked up from the Morrison report. 6 months ago, Vicky wouldn't have known what an irregularity looked like, much less thought to investigate one. Now she was proactively identifying potential fraud. What kind of irregularities? She pulled out her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet with highlighted cells. 3 wire transfers, each just under the 10,000 reporting threshold, all to accounts in the Caymans. The timing is suspicious. They happened right before the compliance audit. I studied her analysis. She was right. It looked like structured money laundering, designed to avoid federal reporting requirements. The kind of thing that could bring down a company if left unchecked. Good catch, I said. Have you documented everything? Yes, and I've already started pulling related transactions from the past 6 months. There's a pattern. This was the work I'd been doing for 23 years. Complex financial detective work that required patience, precision, and an obsessive attention to detail. The same qualities that had made me a good accountant were making Vicky a good fraud investigator. I'll call Treasury and let them know we have a case building, I said. Can you have a full report ready by Thursday? Already working on it. After she left, I sat back in my chair and thought about the strange journey that had brought us both to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been given the chance to get revenge on someone who'd humiliated me for decades. I could have fired her, transferred her to some dead-end department, made her life miserable in 1,000 small ways. Instead, I'd given her exactly what she'd always claimed to want: responsibility, challenge, the chance to prove herself. The fact that she'd initially failed wasn't my fault. It was the natural consequence of years of skating by on charm and confidence. But what happened after that failure? That was her choice. She could have blamed me, blamed the system, blamed bad luck. She could have quit in a huff and found another job where her boyfriend's connections could protect her. Instead, she'd chosen to learn, to grow, to become the person she'd always had the potential to be. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed James Morrison. David, it's James Morrison. I wanted to give you an update on our quarterly review. Of course. How can I help you? Actually, I called to tell you that Victoria's presentation last week was outstanding. Thorough, insightful, exactly what we needed. Whatever you did to get her up to speed, it worked. I smiled. I'll pass along your feedback. Please do. And David, we've been talking about expanding our portfolio management services. We'd like to discuss bringing more of our family's assets under Meridian's management. Can we set up a meeting? Absolutely. I'll have Vicky coordinate the details. After I hung up, I walked to my window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere in those streets were thousands of other people fighting their own battles with family members who didn't understand them, bosses who underestimated them, systems that seemed designed to keep them down. Some of them would get their moment of triumph, their chance to prove that patience and hard work could overcome arrogance and privilege. Some of them would take that moment to get revenge, to humiliate the people who'd humiliated them. But the best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't humiliation or cruelty. It was transformation. It was taking someone who'd spent years putting you down and helping them become someone worthy of respect. It was proving that you were not just successful, but gracious. Not just smart, but kind. Not just powerful, but wise. As I stood there, 37 floors above the city that had once seemed so impossible to conquer, I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life without knowing it. Not triumph, not vindication, not even satisfaction. Peace. The accountant's daughter had finally come home.